So for the sake of our recording and then later publication, if you can just each tell us your name, spell it for us, and then tell us what institution you're coming from, and you want to wait until he gets that boom mic up.
All right. Are we starting here?
Yes.
Yep.
So my name is Tom Kroger. I'm with Sandia National Labs in Livermore, California. The name is spelled Kroeger. First name is spelled Tom.
Jeff Boot, also with Sandia National Labs in California. JEFFBOOTE.
David Fritz, Sandia National Labs, California. VINCEUR FRITZ.
Vince Urias, Sandia National Labs, Albuquerque, New Mexico, URIAS.
So what you're going to want to do is always have eye contact with Amber. I'm not here. Okay? But you are. Don't look down. Just look at Amber.
All right. So tell me a little bit about. So are you all part of the network security team?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about the role of the network security team in supercomputing.
So the network security team is responsible for ensuring that the conference does not make an active nuisance of itself in the general community of the network, of the internet. We're specifically involved in supporting SciNet in giving access to the network to all the participants and the booths and the committee and all of the parts of the conference in order to allow the communications to go on throughout, which includes showing off all of the HPC research and exhibits and industry exhibits.
So protecting the network sounds like it's sort of like the day job of this network security team. But what else, in terms of SciNet, what does this environment do for someone who's in network security? What does SciNet provide that other networks just can't provide?
Cool data.
Yeah, cool data. That's really it. I mean, it's one of the few places where you don't have an ISP actually supporting the network at the conference. So in this case, it's actual researchers that are supporting the network infrastructure itself, which means we can actually have security researchers providing some of the security infrastructure.
So we'll move over to this side of the table. Tell me a little bit about your experience working with SciNet and how it helps you in your day job.
So I've been supporting SciNet for 3 years on the network security team. This is my third year. I think one of the coolest things is actually the ability for me to have access to awesome data, right? So we get to play with next generation security tools and appliances at extremely high data rates, and our ability to sort of understand and categorize and do data analytics and data fusion at such a high data rate, I think is pretty badass.
And so what about you? Same experience? Are you working with different tools?
I'm still onboarding. This is my first year working SciNet in any capacity. So I'm very much still getting my feet wet. But yeah, I have a very similar experience, right? The breadth of data, the breadth of resources we have available to us is pretty amazing. So.
And so for that, we'll move forward to this side of the table. That whole, big data. How does that play a role in what you're doing? I mean, what are the challenges presented when you're talking about 3.63 terabits per second?
So it changes the architecture you have to look at things with. So there's a lot of basic core ways people do things that are just simple. When you start seeing scales at that measure, you just can't throw everything in memory, or you can't create a cluster where everything is simply in memory. You need to start being able to think about how do you expire things, how do you look at things and be able to track and ingest for so fast.
Jeff, would you add anything to that?
The scale is really the big difference, right? So almost no institution anywhere has this much throughput, and that's not what they have in their front door. And the role of security over time has changed very much over the years. Once upon a time, people would put monitoring on their front door, and that's what they would look at. And now with IoT and new devices coming in, you're having to look across the entire network, and people are just now beginning to really scale up and look at huge amounts of data and needing to have that context across a full topology, right? And so SciNet is one of those places where you've actually had to look at this a little bit earlier, because SciNet, it actually peers with multiple RNE networks, multiple ISPs all at the same time, and so the front door of SciNet actually is a very good place over the years to kind of look at representative kind of what the next problem is going to be.
What do you think some of those next problems are?
I would look to these guys more for the next problems.
So it's interesting that you say, because we have so many doors, it's almost as if there are no front doors, it's much more of an open space, and the situational awareness you need to keep. Everybody has the vision that there's a computer monitoring that knows everything, but now it's an integral part of the entire infrastructure, being aware of and creating new approaches to have an integral situational awareness.
How does the human factor play a role in an environment like SC? I think the most recent the recent number I got was nearing 12,000 attendees here at the Colorado Convention Center.
The human factor is always the hardest one in the security game, right? I mean, it's the computer. We've been talking a lot about the vast amounts of data, but at the end of the day, it's trying to determine human behavior throughout the network. What are the behaviors of people doing? Because in security, at the end of the day, just looking at the protocols going across is not going to be the story. That's never going to be, the motivation for what someone's trying to do.
Well, and 12,000 individuals isn't by itself that alarming of a number, right? I mean, a moderately sized enterprise will have that many individuals or more, but they've been vetted to some degree. We have 12,000 strangers for the most part. So.
I think that's one of the biggest challenges of the network, though, right? Is like this network exists for like a week, 2 weeks, right? So traditional network defense tools like are built off of history and identity and a basis of like sort of on a foundation, and we have to build all of that right now, identify users, identify malicious behavior, and use whatever indicators we can find to do remediation as quickly as possible.
Limits your ability to do predictive analysis, which is the holy grail, right?
So in some sense, the change of the network is both a challenge and a complete advantage, because every year we start from scratch. We get to look at, as you said, bleeding edge tools and new approaches, and this is a great place where we get to try new things that a lot of the people here, at least on SciNet, bring back home.
What does that mean for your own institutions? What feedback have you gotten as a result of your experimentation at SciNet?
So one thing that it gets to us in particular is the ability to try out new things and not have that it's hard to bring new things into production environments typically. And this is an environment where you're standing up a production environment in weeks and then it's torn down. So if you make a mistake, it's a 1 week mistake, not a multiple month painful mistake. So you're willing to try new things in a little bit better way.
Yeah, the risk analysis is different.
Yeah.
For the NRE experiment I'm doing here, in the last 2 weeks, I have integrated so many other things that I didn't think about and brought into the process that will easily carry and come home with me on the tool to make it a lot more effective to track statistics that colleagues here said, hey, can you track this, can you track that? And the data was there, so we quickly spun it in, and now that'll be a nice tool to have back home.
Let's talk about some of those other network research exhibition demos that security plays a role in. I understand that kind of each one of you is part of a project. So can you tell us what the project is and how it's meaningful and how it serves the broader community?
Sure. So the project we brought here last year, SC16, and again this year, we call Discovery. It's a map to model tool. Ingests packet capture, router configs, etc., with the goal of building a model of SciNet in real time and across time. So as SciNet changes hourly, people leave at the end of the day, etc., we can build that model and then in turn recreate that model in a sandbox environment and ask any kind of what if question of the model, right?
So I'm doing a lot of network deep packet inspection. So there's been a lot of tools like Bro and Suricata and Snort that existed. One of the things I'm trying to tackle is understanding what happens at higher data rates, right? So when you're looking at 10 gig, 40 gig, 100 gig, how do you create a platform to do the analysis, data collection, and then do more and more data exploitation off of it, right? So we have all these protocols that are coming up based off IoT devices and non-traditional systems, and you want to pull all that information so you can get better heuristics, better predictive analysis, right? Finding weirdness in that data set as much as possible, and then for further exploitation down the line, so.
How many devices do you think are connecting to Signet? Do you have that?
We do have that number. I should know that number. So I think we did. I think I saw over 60,000, 100,000 devices, unique, max unique signature. Yeah, this year I don't know.
Yeah, we haven't summarized it this year yet. Last year, I mean, at one point we had somewhere between, if I remember right, in the neighborhood of 5,000 concurrent associations just to Wi-Fi alone, right? And that was just at one time. So across the multiple days, I think your number's probably in the ballpark.
So, but what's even crazier though, right, is you start looking at the data, you see things like the TVs are now connecting, and you see like the lights are connecting, and you see that you have these wireless devices that are now transmitting data they're connecting. So that number is getting super high, right? So those unique devices, right? I was looking at the AP information, right? And you have, I think I saw like almost 15,000 AP devices, right, related to like infrastructure. That's not including users, which is sort of cool, right? Like the TV's talking, and I don't know, someone's weird, like I think someone had a coffee pot that was talking. I was like, heck yeah.
And it changes the. Go ahead. It changes the connection rate as well, right? We did look at the connection logs today, and for the data last night, and we peaked at 1.2 million flows, connections per minute.
So what I was going to say is one of the things that has changed over time of the conference is that we used to try and figure out how many unique devices would be there, and it would be, we'd max out at 1 per attendee. Now we're more at like somewhere between 4 to 8 per attendee. So there's 12,000 attendees, and that's going on, and that doesn't include the infrastructure that's here, all those TVs and all light bulbs and other things.
The cameras.
Yeah.
But you think about it, right? How many devices do you have? You have your phone, you have a tablet, you have a laptop that you're all connecting in real time, right? So I'm guessing your Nokia may have a wireless device also that you're sort of syncing. Nikon, I'm sorry.
It's Nokia.
Thanks, Fritz.
You have Nokia on the brain.
I do.
We're starting to get vacuuming in the
Yeah.
background, and we're at 13 minutes.
I think we probably have enough. Is there anything else that you'd like to add about your NRE demo?
I can give you an intro summary of it if that
Sure.
would help. So we're using a right optimized data structure to track all these conversations. We're talking about, 2.1 billion flows per second, or million flows per second. And to date, we've tracked, I think, 5 billion actual conversations between two different IP addresses involving SciNet. The core idea is basically trying to create a user right optimized data structure to track that and provide real-time situational awareness so we can say how many we've seen right now.
Is there anything that we didn't ask you about that you want to add about network security?
I don't know. I think it's really cool that we have an opportunity to take sort of lab-related research and test it in a lab-based environment. I think, to me, that's really cool. Being able to say, "Hey, this lab is built. This infrastructure is built by Department of Energy and by ACM and IEEE," and being able to say, "Okay, well, let's take tools and capabilities that we've built in our labs and say, let's field them in order to protect this network." I think it's awesome.
I'll add one thing about the institutional history here. The people that have been around at SciNet, it's really easy to see. I've only been here for 4 years, but it's really easy to see within the NOC. There's a lot of people here that have been here for a long time. There's a lot of knowledge and a lot of interesting history. And even while the environment is an amazing opportunity to learn, it's also some very good insight from some amazing people that have had this hands-on experience for 10, 15 years. And that knowledge base itself, spreading that around is also very powerful. How many years have you been here?
52.
I've been on Signet for 15 years.
All right, veteran award. Okay, I think we got it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right.